Okay, I think we're good to go. So welcome everyone to the semi-finals of the Devon Autumn Grand Prix. I'm Tom Thorpe, and you'll notice I'm not with Tim Porton this week. This is definitely not Tim. I'm joined this evening by Paul Hampton, who is an equally strong chess player. Good evening, Paul.
Yes, good evening.
Now, I think we've got the unfortunate titles of losing quarter-finalists in this tournament, but we'll have to live with that. Um, so we're gonna quickly go over the one of the semi-finals matches that have already been played. Got played on Wednesday night. We've got four matches overall: two in the Open, two in the major section. One of the major games has already been played, so we'll quickly go over that as people start to come in, and then at 22, hopefully some live games will come in and we'll be able to watch and give some insight in what on earth is going on. Um, so this was the match between David Holmes and Charlie Keane. Now, Paul, I think you probably know Charlie better than I do. Um, how long have you sort of known him? How strong do you sort of have you found Charlie in the past, and how have you found him when playing him during
Yeah,
the tournaments?
yeah. So Charlie, I mean, known Charlie for quite some time now. So he's regular at the Seton Chess Club. He usually comes for the tournaments. He has beaten me in the past. So he's a respectable player.
Yeah,
Um, does uh, kind of likes the I think it's the Alpine kind of for white and uh, against the Sicilian.
yeah.
Which is always a bit awkward to play against.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always found him quite awkward to play against. Certainly in all the tournaments, I seem to have played him quite a lot in the first round. Sort of just how the pairings come about. So yeah, I mean he finished fourth in the graded section in the Grand Prix, facing the top seed David Holmes, the winner of the Grand Prix in the spring, I believe, for the graded section, if my memory serves me right. So up against a very difficult opponent. I mean, he always seems to be there or thereabouts in the tournaments on Mondays and Fridays that we've run over the last 7 weeks. Um, just quickly going into their first game. Again, this was played on Wednesday night. They're playing two games of 9 minutes plus 3 seconds, which was the Mellow Monday time control, the slower, if you want to call it slow, time control, and then two games at 5 plus 2. Um, and we saw sort of in the spring, we're seeing the same sort of openings from David. Um, a nice Smith Morra gambit, which I mean, me and you, Paul, are both Sicilian players. Do you find the Smith Morra gambit particularly awkward to face, or do you find it generally okay?
Yeah, I'm kind of a bit mixed with it. I think on a longer play, I would be quite happy with it. But
Mm,
in the shorter time controls, it can be a bit tricky. But you can get a lot of pieces develop very quickly.
yeah,
The play is a bit easier, I think, for white, and black has to find kind of the best, more precise moves all the time.
yeah.
But I think in the long run, I kind of think it is it's better for black in the long run. But
Yeah, I remember when starting out with Sicilian, I lost quite a few games to Smith Morra Gambit in like 8 or 9 moves. Like it can be very dangerous. Just the pressure that comes on f7, the bishop out here, the knight coming forwards. It can be very tricky, and um, because I don't normally play like e6 to block off that bishop, it can sometimes be tricky. Um, Now this game has a nice little tactic here. So let's move e5, the trade on e5, and then bishop takes f7, king takes, and then queen to d5. So hitting both the king and the bishop. And I suppose if the king comes forwards to f6, that king's just going to be in all sorts of trouble. Something like knight e4 perhaps to check and then take the bishop, or it doesn't
yeah,
look right. So
yeah,
you win sort of the material back, and you've got pressure here, and the game sort of continues. I think White's doing fairly well here. Just this queenside pieces are not doing so great, but it's still play. But this first game was decided unfortunately by another sort of tactical thing. I'll skip through. You can see the queen here is getting into a little bit of trouble, having to face the rook, and black's king's
yeah.
a bit stuck. and the pressure came through in the end after rook f8. There's the nice move knight f6 check, so discovering an attack on the queen, checking the king, and the queen drops, and very
Yeah.
soon it was 1-0 to David. Apologies, I'm not giving too much analysis on these, but I'm conscious that the live games will start soon. Um, games plays the colours got reversed for the second game, and again David plays this Nimzovich opening, which he plays all the time, and yeah, in his email rounding up sort of how he plays this game, he said, "How many times have we seen this line in his game, sort of both in the tournaments and also in the semi-finals?" Um, have you sort of? You're mostly a sort of a birds opening player, but have you sort of faced these more offbeat openings with the Nimzovich? Sort of, how can these offbeat openings be quite effective? Or
Yeah. Well, when I started chess, I was always an e4 player.
oh
So
right, okay,
yeah, sort of, you have to develop a repertoire.
mm,
To be honest, I didn't come across this very often.
yeah,
So I don't think I've got a set response to this,
mm,
Nimzovich in particular. But
yeah. I'm not sure I do, and I
mm,
regularly play 1e4, but I'm not sure I have a set move set for anything. It's just make it up, see what happens.
yeah,
Um, so okay, I mean the pieces came forwards, and then this move knight a3, sort of looking to develop this knight, sort of breaks up white structure after takes, which I think left Charlie in a pretty tough position here. Black sort of got everything he's wanted really. Nice development, central control. These pawns broken, and yeah, unfortunately the game again ends pretty quickly, dropping the a pawn, um, winning the second pawn on d file, and already very very tricky. And with the king stuck in the center,
yeah.
it wasn't long before checkmate came on the board there, um, to take a 2-0 lead going in. Just before we go on to the sort of shorter games, how have you found sort of the difference between the longer time controls on Monday, so the 9+3, and the slightly shorter ones in 5+2? Do you notice a big difference between the Monday and Friday tournaments?
Yeah, I think the Monday ones have always been a bit tougher for me,
Mm,
really. Um, I think I always kind of generally do better on the Fridays with the shorter control. So I guess everybody has a little bit more time to think about the games, and
yeah.
it's harder just to get blitzed away just by having playing quickly.
Yeah.
So
So do
yeah,
you tended to do better in the Fridays compared to
yes, yeah,
the Mondays?
oh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think for some players it's probably so for you sort of it's preferring the Fridays, but for some players the extra time probably is an advantage, and that's one of the things we'll talk about when we come to look at the live games, because we've got a particular speed demon which I'm sure we'll mention that
I don't know, yeah.
that no one can possibly know who that is. But I think for someone like Steve Dean, who we both know in sort of the major section, he much prefers it, from what I can see, the longer time controls, the more increment. Um, but we'll come on to that later. Um, just quickly to tell you the rest of the match between David and Charlie. Um, David 2-0 up, so Charlie needing to win game 3 and 4 to take it to tie breaks, which I'm sort of hoping we don't get this evening. So I would like an early night, but we will see. Chess.com seems to have broken. There we go. Um, we had another Nimzovich and oops, Charlie playing a different opening against this, different setup. And just again skipping through because we haven't got too much time. Got a very, very playable position. And I mean, this position is almost a dream, really. A lovely central control. Black's pieces are a bit stuck. And I think White can play this fairly slowly and do well. And in the end, White's going to win a pawn here potentially as well. Does win the pawn and eventually does break through. I'll just quickly skip through and see if I can find the key moment. I did have a very quick look through these games earlier, but it's always tricky to remember exactly what is there. But yeah, several pawns dropping off, and
These bishops looking good.
yeah, and in fact, after rook c7, that's just hanging the rook, and so that made it 2-1. So all to play for in the final game. But another Smith-Morra gambit, similar opening to the previous one, except now e6 coming from Charlie, and we get this variation which hasn't gone particularly well, I don't think, for black. This king now not being able to castle.
It's tricky.
Yeah. These, after going e6, knight b5, it's always awkward to have to face this. Can you play d5 here to try and stop knight d6 check? You might be able to in this position, but it's always...
I mean, the lines I play for black is a very early a6, so knight
Yeah.
c6, e6.
Yeah, just to stop any of this knight b5.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, the game, as you can see by the number of moves, was a long battle, but it sort of reached a position where white was 2 pawns up going into the end game, and Charlie as black needing to get the draw, and after dropping the bishop on b7 wasn't able to do so, and in the end this is the final position where David won that match by 3 points to 1, and apologies again that wasn't covered in huge detail, but I have noticed the time, and I do notice that there are some games going on, so I shall flick over to the other screen and we shall open up the matches. I think 2 of the matches have begun. We're still waiting on 1 more match to go. So we've got Jack Rudd against Tim Porton in the open section, John Underwood and Robert Taylor, who have just started their match here. So John playing white in the first game, playing the Birds opening, and a From's Gambit. We'll come back to this in a moment. In fact, I might leave this on because the From's Gambit is a very, very tricky opening. Paul, as a Birds player yourself, give us some insight in what on earth is going on here, because I don't know.
Well, yeah. So this is so what black's try to do here, gives up a pawn very early to get very rapid development, and if white castles kingside here, which he kind of almost always does, you get a lot of pressure, good attacking opportunities for black. The downside for black is that he's given up 2 central pawns, so white will, if he can resist the attack, will eventually get a very strong centre. And usually by now, in these sorts of positions, I would have already played d4 to try and try and strike back into the centre, get some space back. So very kind of double-edged position. Really, Birds is very exciting, open to play.
Yeah.
For both sides, when you get this these sort of from gambits, and I must say that the bishop g4 line is the one that's particularly tricky.
Yeah.
There's other lines that are quite a bit more brute force, with a sort of g5 can be played very early on.
Yeah.
But this bishop g4 is very, very tricky, difficult to play against.
And so in this position, white's obviously now castled on the king side. How is black? Black's still a pawn down here. How is black going to try and attack on the king side? Is it remove this knight as a defender and then try and attack h2, or?
Yeah, I think h2 is going to become the weak point in the game. If the queen can come to h4 eventually, that's very dangerous. So black will be thinking about taking on f3 at some point. But it's just getting that right combination. The knight can come to e5 at some point as well, potentially, to try and remove that defender. But I think this is okay really for black. White hasn't really got back into the centre yet. It's always going to be playing this sort of quietly is going to be a difficult slog, I think, for white.
And it's interesting for me. It's sort of like, okay, White's managed to develop their pieces. So the first time when I was looking at this just now, I was thinking, well, how has Black managed to get any sort of compensation for the pawn? But you sort of think, well, okay, these pieces are developed, but where are they actually going? Um, because you've not got the centre and played a move like d4 or d3 e4, it I don't know. It almost feels White's a little bit cramped here.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's the thing. I don't think the D3 is not possible. And
mm,
E4 is not possible yet. It's going to be a while to get back in
yeah,
to the centre. Black doesn't have to particularly hurry here, I don't think,
yeah,
but does need to find a way of of getting some action on the on the king side here.
yeah. Now
Um,
you played Robert in the quarterfinals. Sorry to bring this up, but sort of did did Robert play the From's Gambit against you? Was it this line, and how did those games generally go? Was it something very similar to this, other than
yeah,
perhaps you go d4
that's
earlier
right.
on?
Yeah, that's it. So I'd played D4 this exact line, but I'd sort of played D4 very early on,
Yeah.
um, and then what happened really was there was a lot of pressure on that D4 pawn. So C5 was played, and then the rook came to D8, and eventually I actually lost the D pawn because of
Okay.
a nice tactic. So
Yeah.
yeah, so,
It's a very tricky opening. So okay, we'll come back to this game. John, of course, Devon captain, um, probably a Devon stalwart. I think is probably a way of saying it. But Robert, who plays in Wales, I think he lives in Newport or around there. Someone I've known for a number of years playing in Wales, come over and played in the Devon Grand Prix and has made it into the semi-finals. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how a fresh face, shall we say, is going to get on. Um, we have got one more match going on, which is Steve Dean against Daryl Watson. Um, Now, Steve Dean won the autumn mini Swiss earlier on in the week on Wednesday, so playing as Black here in game one to try and take two of the Devon titles and take all of those virtual trophies home with him. Um, Now, Steve, someone me and you both know, quite well and have seen in the chess scene for ages. Um, Daryl, somebody who we perhaps don't know as well, somebody who's played and been very consistent across the Grand Prix, scoring very sort of 50% scores throughout and finishing third overall. But I don't think I've played him that much. I think I may have only played him a couple of times in the tournaments. But as far as I can remember, he seemed to be quite an aggressive player. Now we did get a Caracan in this first game, which I think we've come to expect from Steve. And for those that have watched the mini Swiss, I'm sure we'll all be expecting a London in the return game as White. Um, this position's looking quite good for Black. I'm trying to work out why the engine
seems,
is giving it
well,
so good. I don't.
he's a piece down, isn't he? White's a piece down.
Oh yeah,
Not
I
quite
can't
sure how
count.
he managed to. Yeah, didn't quite
That's
lose.
fair. Yeah, I was
So,
thinking, well, the centre's sort of falling apart here for White, and I thought, oh well, maybe there's some sort of knockout blow. But of course, you're right that Black has three pieces and White has two. Um, where's that fallen then? Let's just quickly jump back before we have to catch up with the speed demon himself in the open, Jack Rudd. Um, so Queen A5, Queen A6, looking to go into an early end game, which was definitely Steve's plan during the mini Swiss. It'd be interesting to see or hear what he's trying to do in this tournament. But okay, after knight d2, unfortunately cutting off the defense of the knight on e2, so not the best start, unfortunately, for Daryl. And yeah, with this d pawn dropping as well, it's I think it's fair to say that's going to be a tricky one to save for White.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all done these things where
Oh yeah.
we just it's been very impulsive about, oh, that's the best move, let's do that, just without just taking that extra fraction of a second just to say, well, if I do that, what's the response going to be? But it's so difficult. It's easy to say, but difficult
Yeah,
to
it's
practice.
the an idea of sort of the weakness of the last move, which I've heard sort of bandied about a bit as sort of okay, every move you make, it what's it actually taking away from your position as well as giving, and obviously there it was the defense of the knight. So yeah, that's I'm trying to think how does White try and come back into this because these are fairly quick games,
Yeah.
and Steve down to 3.5 minutes already. So there is a potential to come back. Although I think can Black get away with Bishop takes b4 here, exploiting the pin on the rook?
Yeah, that looks feasible. I think the difficulty here is the White's black squared bishop. It needs to get a lot more active to get
Yeah,
back into the game
sort of stuck in
behind these
behind these
pawns.
pawns, and this knight on e3 control f5 controls e3. It's yeah, it's tricky. Sort of when you're behind, you almost just need to. I don't want to say throw the kitchen sink at your
Yeah,
opponent, but it's close to it. Just get your pieces active and try and create problems. And yeah, I think it's me tricky. I think if you're not sure whether this bishop takes b4 is a good idea, just develop it and play something solid like bishop e7. I think is a very sound idea. Okay, I think we'll
yeah,
leave this one to go for the moment because Black has a piece up in this position, so it'll be interesting to see how Steve does here and whether he can convert this and take a 1-0 lead. Let's move over to Jack Rudd versus Tim Porton. Jack, the reigning Grand Prix champion, and Tim Paulden, the person that knocked me out of the quarterfinals and someone that regularly commentates with me, certainly through the mini Swiss. Um, and I think we've both faced Jack quite a few times in these things, and it's fair to say he's very strong and very quick. What's your experience been against Jack throughout the Grand Prix?
yeah. I mean, exactly that. So very, very quick. I just find against Jack, I don't know what it is, but I just tend to play very poorly against him for some reason. I don't know if it's. I'm sure it's a psychological thing, and maybe that happens. When you are in general playing against someone who is very good player. You,
Yeah,
you tend not to play as well. And even when I've been in good positions, I've ended up being very nervous about it, thinking, how has this happened? And you then kind of go on to make mistakes. But um, but I think Jack does plays very quickly, plays very aggressively as well. But
yeah,
but sometimes it doesn't always work for Jack. Sometimes it may not be as sound
yeah.
what he's actually doing, and with a little bit of thought and careful play, you can actually get an advantage.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, certainly in the semi-finals in the spring, I think this is a rematch. Tim played Jack then as well, and I think it was 3-1. I think Tim managed to actually win one of those games, and yeah, one of the things I've noticed with Jack's play, certainly in the finals of the Spring Grand Prix when he played John, was that actually John had chances, but because Jack plays so quickly and so confidently, it's almost knowing when those chances come up is actually quite difficult, and yeah, psychologically it can be tricky. I don't think I've ever seen Tim play the Dutch before and play a Dutch stonewall like this. This I wouldn't be surprised if Tim's done a bit of work here to try and a bit of preparation. But this is a very double-edged opening. I find it can sometimes be a bit boring, but sort of giving up this e5 square, which just a knight's going to sit really nicely here on this outpost, um, for black to try and gain some control on sort of on the center and put a clamp on what white's doing. I sort of skipped through the moves as we were talking about Jack, but yeah, I've seen Jack play this knight h3, knight f4 idea and try and use the knights, put this knight on e5, the other knight on f4, and try and use them sort of together to create some pressure. Um, it's I mean, I don't know. You're a Dutch player as well, but I don't know how well you know the stone wall and sort of how to play it, and how, if you've played it a huge amount.
Yeah, I used to play it a lot when I was younger.
Okay.
Just as a repertoire against D4 really. So
Mm.
I tend not to play it now. Because of the types of reasons that you were saying. White. It's kind of very early in the game to give up that square on an
Yeah.
E5. And you're always going to have kind of structural problems. So I tend not to do that. I tend to play the classical, so the pawn's just on D6 and
D6.
trying to
Yeah.
push, yeah, trying to push for E5. But it is, I mean, I have seen Tim starting to move. I have seen him play sort of bird type setups
Yeah.
more recently. With kind of a reversed type of Dutch. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that he's playing the Dutch. I've not seen that
Yeah.
play very much, but I think that some of the principles are the same, but with you just have a move, you've got an extra move with the birds.
Yeah. And this is an interesting move here. So giving up the two pieces for the rook and the pawn, which um, generally isn't the best idea. I was wondering whether it would have been better just to take on e5, but then maybe Tim was worried that White was going to infiltrate with the rooks. Um, I'm not entirely sure what's wrong with knight takes e5 here, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the key things, and this is something we will see throughout the whole match, I'm sure, is the time situation. Um, Jack,
No.
still having 6 minutes, but Tim already down to the increment. Um, and I mean, Tim, I don't think he won't mind me saying that he's not the fastest player around, and against Jack, he'll know he'll get chances, but whether he's got the time to convert them is going to be
Yeah, I think he could have taken the knight and got a sort of a rook ending
yeah,
that's defendable. I mean, the rook would come to C7 eventually, but
yeah.
I think
But
that he can defend that. Yeah.
yeah, whereas White's now, Jack's trying to just open things up and use this really nice knight on e5 on its really good square that Black gave up, and yeah, I mean, you may even be able to take twice on f5 here and win a pawn back. Um, Jack deciding not to go for it.
Yeah. I mean, you can see the score there. It's almost treating this as if White's a piece up, and that
Yeah,
just reflects, the quality of the position for the pieces.
yeah. It's getting these rooks active for Black that's the tricky thing. It's obviously good now that Tim's trying to, get active on the c file, because when you've got both the rooks, they can sometimes get in each other's way. Ooh, and
Looks a poor.
that's going to be curtains, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so
This
so
is what happens when you've got 3 seconds on the clock.
well,
Uh,
yeah, when you're playing on such short increment, Tim, I'm assuming just forgetting that the king was put in front, in between the rooks there, or felt like he was struggling anyway. I have seen a result come in, but chess.com has helpfully just overwritten it. Um, so I have seen that. God, messing this up completely. That John did beat Robert in that game, the From's Gambit. The game has disappeared though, because I think they've cancelled and they've just started their second game, so we won't be able to see exactly what's happened. If I make a note of that, I'll make sure to have a look at that at the end of the stream for those that are interested. But John has taken a 1-0 lead in his match against Robert. So we will hop back to the game between Steve Dean and Daryl Watson, just to see the conclusion of their first game. Remember, they're playing 2 games of 9+3 and then 2 games of 5+2, and then tie breaks coming up afterwards if it's 2-2 at the end, which we could very well see in well, I think in all three of these matches, there's the potential to see tie breaks. I think you know Jack is probably a good favourite to take the match in normal time, if you like, against Tim. But again, as we were saying, Jack can make mistakes, so we'll see what happens. So what's going on in this position? We left it that Steve was a piece up, and he is still this piece up, and is also 2 pawns as well to the good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but White's at least got active and is trying to get some pressure against the
Yeah,
king.
managed
Keep
to expose the king,
mm,
which is a good thing.
yeah, keeping the
So,
pieces on the board as well, which is a good idea. And I mean the time situation, um, Steve down to his last 7 seconds, and Daryl, still got 1.5 minutes on the clock. So yeah, I mean, with best play, Steve is gonna probably take this one, but with such short time, anything can really happen. But this is a nice move to try and
yeah,
mount combat against the thing. Although that has dropped. What's going on here? That's why. Hang on. What happened there? Let's just quickly drop back.
I think that
So
the rook's been on Prix for several moves. I don't know.
yeah. So after bishop d4, White's taken the bishop seemingly for free, and then after knight e2, instead of just taking the rook on f1, which we were probably expecting, after knight e2, the engine bar has completely flown here because you can play rook takes knight
It's not.
here because you've got the threat of queen g2 checkmate,
Yeah,
a queen g7 checkmate rather, so you can't take this back. So and that's attacking the queen as well. So Daryl had a chance there, which is as we were saying, it's about the time situation that sometimes you can miss these things. On
yeah.
Wednesday, we had a game where it was, a queen played check, and it could have just been taken by a queen, and both players missed that the queens were attacking each other. I mean, it was utter chaos. But after that opportunity missed by Daryl, it's now a piece up for 2 pawns still, but this is a little bit of a less messy position. The king is relatively safe, I would say, and black's got adequate control over b6 here. Just
Yeah,
got to be careful not to allow this pawn to promote. Now there's no way to stop this.
yeah.
He'll
Probably didn't
take.
want to swap the queens off, really.
No, I mean, I'm wondering whether there was anything better here to have a better try, but I mean,
Mm.
it's always tricky when this pawn's going to drop off anyway, and if that's the counterplay you were after, then and you're about to lose it, then maybe try one last thing. Um, so okay, now with the final knight fork, Daryl has resigned, so that's 1-0 to Steve in their match. So I'll just update that over there. Right, let's jump back to Jack Rudd against Tim Porton because I know that this game's going to go in a flash. Um, and Tim playing not his usual 1b3, but
Yeah,
has decided to
I'm
play the
not
English.
sure why he's deviating from what he knows best. But
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know Tim has played. I think he played. I'm trying to remember if he played b3 against me in the quarterfinals, both games. He certainly did in one of the games, and it was very successful. I think he did in both the games. I cheekily played 1b3 against Tim in one of the games just because he's he plays that all the time, and so I thought I'd
see, see
pretend
this.
like I'd prepared something, but I hadn't. I just thought it'd
Yeah,
be fun. It didn't go particularly well, um, but Tim's got a fairly reasonable position here, but Black's putting quite a lot of pressure on in the centre, and I'm not sure what this bishop on g2 is hitting at. It's currently a big pawn, really, defending e4. Any preference on who you'd rather be in this position?
well, I mean, White. white looks okay, but there's some, I think that the centre is under a lot of attack, so I'm not sure uh, how long they'll be able to maintain that.
Mm.
If the pawn black takes on d4, there's this horrible diagonal that maybe black can exploit. The g1s. Yeah, this I can see some tactics there with the
Yeah,
queen. And
queen coming out to b6 maybe, and
even just something subtle like rook c8 or something, or
yeah, to
just queen c.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, and then there's this open b file as well that black can exploit.
yeah, and with this open file, it almost feels like black wants the center closed because then you can start attacking on the flank. They always say sort of if you've got a closed center, then you know generally sort of attacking on a flank is a good idea, and this b file's ideal for that. Um, and I'm just trying to think, how does white act like where's white's play going to come from? Is it going to come from something like f4, g4, and f5 perhaps?
I think it has to. I mean, f4 has to come, otherwise black's going to break up the centre with a sort of f6 eventually, and the tables will be turned. Black will be end up with the centre with the D and E pawns. So
Yeah.
I think for me, it's got to be play on the king side now. But that's
Yeah.
kind of my my style of play.
Well, yes, and here black plays rook b4, which is threatening some of these tactics, threatening rook takes bishop, because if queen takes bishop, then you can play bishop c5, and if you can imagine the queen on d4, that's going to pin that to the king, so you're going to win the queen in that line. So white's got to be very careful of these sorts of tactics, and they're quite common that once black's able to break through in the center, then these tactics can come. Tim sidestepping out of the way there. Um, but now potentially this e pawn could come under some fire. I'm trying to think of the best way of doing it. I'm even thinking about this exchange sacrifice. Um, but this is also a way to get rid of this bishop on d4.
And I think Jack's thinking about all these white squares he can exploit because like d3 if the knight
Yeah,
can come there, or the the white bishop on g2 is kind of stuck at the moment.
yeah, and I think that's another reason to potentially play f4 is to try and activate that bishop. But yeah, I think black seems to just be getting the initiative here, just seemingly starting to put on the pressure, and it'll be interesting to see how Tim responds to this. Again, the time situation, Jack's barely used a minute, and Tim already down to his last 3 minutes. But this is just the nature of how Jack plays. He's not going to slow down at the end. He will play at this pace until the bitter end. Um, but
Yeah, so now
yeah,
he
these pieces are
can't
looking
play a3 now.
yeah,
Yeah,
a3 of course is drops the b pawn. So yeah, this is looking tricky. Like how does white get active here? Okay, he's going f4.
yeah,
It,
that
it's
kind of makes
slightly yeah, it's sort of almost is a little bit scary because you're weakening this diagonal, but this bishop should
he's
do
got to
enough.
get back to the game really. So
Yeah. Now
uh,
this pawn coming through, which
mm,
is the game is now going to depend on, is this pawn a strength or a weakness? It can't be defended by another pawn yet, but it's going to start gaining a lot of space here, and I think it's got enough pieces around it that it's probably going to be quite a strong pawn.
yeah, I think there's a bit of an elaborate knight maneuver required here, but I think knight really wants to try and get to d6 if it can, maybe via c4.
Yeah, but how do you get there? Was it?
It was b1, I
I
think.
think it was
b1
b1,
d2.
d2, a4, d6. It's
Yeah,
a long way round, and now if this knight's going back to c1, maybe g1, um,
back to c3 now, I think.
oh c3 as well. Yes, but
But
then
that
on
was, I think,
yeah.
b1 it could have gotten a sort of a better route to be more dynamic.
He has gone knight g1. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this game turns out. Tim, short of time. I'm conscious that we should have a look at some of the other games. We'll come back to this one because they'll probably take a short break after the end of it. So let's have a look at John against Robert. Robert losing the first game, playing white in the second game, um, and this is a very open king pressing. I'm just trying to work out what I think about it. It's gained a lot of space, and but this king does feel very drafty on g1.
So, Derek, is this what we got? A delayed Alpine?
Yeah, so we've got a delayed Alpin. So instead of going d4, going d3, and then hopefully, let's just notice that the cameras have just switched slightly, so I'll just quickly fix that. There we go. And so black develops normally, and then white has attacked this bishop with g4, and has after g5, f4, completely gaining space, and John deciding to sidestep on the queen side with his king. This, after f6, not worrying, just going f5. It takes a brave person to play this sort of thing, I think. It's not something I'd be.
I'd be better just waiting for the black to castle king side, really, before really committing to this.
Yeah, because now it's sort of these pawns have, pressed forwards, and they're not sort of attacking anything. You don't want to open up these lines now because they're opening up lines for your opponent to start attacking you down the G file, perhaps. So now this knight's obviously pinned to the queen. So this is, you can play bishop takes c4 here. There we go. But yeah, it does feel like black's doing quite well here. If black can start opening up the king's side, then
with these sorts of things, it's almost very rapid b4 here to try and now attack on the queen side. I think is what I would be.
Yeah,
it
feels like black's going to get enough on the queen side. This is a nice square for the bishop, but yeah, after bishop takes, you've got to be a little bit careful you don't have any discoveries. You don't quite in this position. Yeah, you've got to slightly watch out for knight f3 check, but of course the queen can sidestep out the way whilst taking it. But
so yeah, I think here maybe bishop e3, let the g5 pawn block black's advance there, and
yeah,
just try and get b4.
And just try and go here. Taking on g5, this feels dangerous because black's going to eventually open up this g file, and yeah, that's going to be tricky. Okay, trading. Black's knights look really good in the center of the board. I'm even considering something like just c4 and just clamping down in the center. This looks quite good for black, I think. Okay, hitting b2. Trying to dissuade this b4 push. Yeah, this is looking quite nice for black, I think. Trying to work out the best way that black can proceed here.
Yeah, I think opening lines on the G file.
Yeah, trying to think
maybe
if
with
move
a
just
well-timed G6 that avoids just F6, but
yeah. I almost think like a move like Queen E5 might be good, just to put pressure on the bishop and try and get G6. As you say, going G6 straight away, does it allow F6? That's going to be probably the move White has to play to try and prove his position.
Can F6. Maybe there's a knight F4 as a possibility, and picks up the bishop. And the bishop's a possible pain for black at the minute.
Yeah. As I said, sort of when the bishop came to e6, oh, that's a nice square for the bishop. But actually, it's almost turning out to be, okay, a nice outpost for a small amount of time. and then now potentially could be a weakness once this, excuse me,
Yeah,
this f pawn goes.
yeah.
And
So we get F6, knight F4, white has to defend the bishop, so then it's bishop G, queen G4 maybe to
yeah,
defend.
then
Or
can
then
he
maybe
go
even
h5 maybe and just take it? Well, okay, white's decided to
yeah.
take this, but I think, well, I was about to suggest maybe move like rook g8 in. Oh no, the bishop covers it. Ignore me. Um, then now maybe black can just pile up on this h file. This g file is now closed, so.
Yeah.
But the
So we've got
knight's
the
just
H
looking
file.
really good. The h file, yeah, this is nice. This knight coming in to try and put pressure on everything. It may not be that there's a knockout blow straight away, but it definitely feels like black's activity is just huge. This knight stuck on h2, you know, a move like rook d3 here perhaps just to add more pressure whilst
It
attacking the
needs to
queen.
be, well, he needs to defend his knight in F4, so G5.
G5 and yeah, I like this. Just to quickly jump back, Jack Rudd has managed to take this second game. Was on time, but well, we caught a quick glimpse of it. But that D pawn came all the way to D2 and
Yeah.
seemingly sealed the deal. Um, so Tim with it all to do now in the quick portion. Um, and one thing I was gonna say earlier on is that sort of, you know, with Jack being such a quick player, if Tim was going to get anything out of the match, would you have thought it was perhaps in the slightly longer time control, or you know, maybe in the shorter time control to try and catch Jack out, even though he plays the same way in both, really?
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, I think that's kind of these first two games were probably his best opportunity.
yeah,
But you
it's
never
a
know.
it's an uphill task, but I've seen stranger things in chess. Um, so we'll leave them to play their first blitz game. Um, as we take a quick look at Steve Dean against Daryl Watson in their second game, and we've reached a rook endgame. John did manage to win this second game. Just quickly jumping back, um, unfortunately the queen was left on Prix, but White was under a lot of pressure there. I think anyway. I think you know, I think okay there was a blunder, but I think it was always going to be tough. Ooh, as Paul's camera has gone incredibly big on the stream, so I shall just rearrange that. There we go. That's fine. So John has taken a 2-0 lead in that match, so Robert all to do in the blitz portion as well. And this looks like a very good end game for Steve here. 3 pawns up,
Ones.
and well, about to be 4 as well. This pawn on e7 dropping. Just a matter of technique here, but
A little
yeah,
bit short time, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, we've seen this time and time again from Steve,
Mhm.
just playing off of the increment and
Yeah,
getting the job done, even in sometimes quite tricky positions.
yeah. So I think if White can swap off a rook, it will be definitely one.
Yeah,
If Black can get, the two rooks and maybe down the back
yeah.
rank
If this rook
somewhere.
could fly over to e2, perhaps it's not letting me to draw the arrow because rooks don't move that way. But if the rook had flown all the way to like f2, for example, then try and get some checks going. Which
Yeah,
he's going to try
I've
here,
seen that. Yeah. So
but
this is the type of thing that where you get some play.
yeah. And now White's getting the counterplay on c6 very quickly, which
Yeah.
is good. You know, in these rook end games, you always want to get your rooks active as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good general guideline about rook end games is to play the active move,
Yeah,
not the defensive one. Try and get your rook attacking something.
yeah. Even at the cost of a pawn, sometimes it can be worth just sacrificing it to get some activity. You'd rather be a pawn down but active than equal
Yeah.
but passive in a rook endgame. Um, but this is looking pretty ominous, I think, for Daryl and Steve, who came second in the Grand Prix standings for the graded players, is probably going to be taking a 2-0 lead, time permitting, of course. Steve's got to be a little bit careful of the time, but yeah, I quite like this. Rook b6 and then just play rook a7, trade a pair of rooks. Okay, you lose the a pawn, but you've got 3 pawns, and this is a much
Yeah,
simpler endgame, I think.
it's killed all real kind of play for
Yeah,
black now.
yeah. It's this idea of simplification. Okay, sort of, the top engines wouldn't play this because they're losing some of their advantage. They're losing a pawn, but as humans, this is a far better practical decision, and black's doing the right thing to try and check from behind. But yeah, it's going to be very, very tricky to stop all of these pawns. And black also playing very quickly, um, which is the right thing to do to try and force your opponent to make quick moves. But all the natural moves are good, unfortunately for black here. Just slowly move the pawns and the king forwards, and soon checkmate's going to come. E6 here, and rook h8 is threatened, so the king's got to move into the corner. But now you can move the rook away, or you could even have just gone e7 straight away. Every move wins pretty much. So I think we will leave this one. I think Steve's playing quick enough that I think we can assume that he'll probably convert this one. So let's take a look at Jack versus Tim. Tim, of course, needing to win this game. And we had a French defense from Tim. Again, an opening I've not seen him play. He's trying to transpose this into some weird King's Indian, but White just playing very aggressively and getting this. Black's getting this light squared setup, which I have seen Tim play a lot. Steve did manage to convert that game, so he's now 2-0 up in his match. I won't skip through all the openings because they're playing very quickly. But they've reached this position, which is equal material. But which side would you rather take here, Paul?
Yeah, well, let's have a look at this one. So, I mean, yeah, White's got good pressure down the c file. Very good knight on d6.
Mm.
Although Black could take that off.
White decided to go after this b pawn instead of remain on this c file, allowing this knight to be taken, but of course that would drop the b pawn. And I'm trying to work out if black can get away with taking here, and then after e takes, actually playing a move like knight a8, which seems so passive, but eventually you're going to go, b5 and knight b6. I'm just trying to work out if this pawn on d6 is particularly strong, or
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's a bit tricky to
yeah.
find a good plan for black here.
I mean, maybe if Black can concentrate on dislodging this d6. He's done that, knight
He has
a8.
done knight a8, which is very passive, but
Yeah,
I mean, if you can get away with it, then it's probably quite good. But
thing was it? Is it such a big deal if the b pawn is lost? It's
yeah, I suppose Tim's looking that in the long term, this b pawn will, eventually start marching down the board and create some counterplay. And I suppose Tim's trying to hang on to um, that possibility. But yeah, it feels like a very comfortable position for White to play and just keep putting pressure. A move like knight g5 would pretty much force black to either take on d6 or play a move like bishop e8 or bishop e6. to defend f7, but of course with the knight on c6 needing to be defended by d7, you've got to be very, very careful of that bishop becoming overloaded.
Yeah. I think only take on d6 if you can guarantee that you'll win the pawn. He's done it.
He has done it. Maybe he just felt that the pressure would come
Yeah.
through, but yeah,
So
this
it's a while to get any attacks on that pawn.
well, this knight's just totally on the wrong square for it. You ideally want to go knight b6, knight c8 to attack it, but yeah, after bishop b5, this knight is completely trapped in. It's not even a big pawn, it is just achieving very little there. And I mean, the only thing it is doing is defending c7, so white can't go rook c7.
Can take and play rook c8 check, and then rook.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, you can't quite get away with rook c7. This rook on a2 is going to defend the pawn as it comes through on c7. But yeah, this is advantage white here, but whether it's winning is another question, because this king is, looking to come in. And it's just why white played knight h4 to attack g6.
So Tom, just say I'm going to have to just nip out now. So
no problem at all, Paul. Thanks very much for joining, and yeah, good luck in any future tournaments we do.
Yeah.
Until you play me, in which case I wish you no success at all.
Well, thanks very much. Really great pleasure to get involved in this.
No, it's brilliant to have you on the stream, Paul. Thanks very much for joining.
Cheers then.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Bye-bye. So, okay, we are left. Okay, sorry about that. As Paul left the thing, the Skype call decided to stop. So apologies, I am back. You're not getting rid of me that easily, I'm afraid. But as I was sorting that out, Tim has got a fantastic chance here. This pawn on b2 coming through. Rook c1 is a great move. And that is a win. Tim has managed to turn that game around. Clearly, Paul was a bad omen for Tim. So that game has gone 2-1. We will come back to this match soon. I will need to sort out the stream in just a moment, but as I put up the match between John and Robert, I'd love to go back and see what actually happened in that game. We'll do that at the end. But 2-1 now, and Tim has a chance to equalise that matchup. And I mean, secretly, I don't want that happening because I'd like him to come and help commentate. But we will see. I'm just going to spend a couple of moments just sorting out the stream after Paul has now left. So if you give me a couple of moments to sort that out. There we go. And then we don't need the names there either. We don't. Tim's not here either. There we go. I think you all know who I am by now. So we'll leave the names off for now, and then if Tim comes and joins us later, we'll sort that out. So this is the match between John and Robert in the open section. John 2-0 up. Robert needing to get something, needing to get a win rather in this third game, and Steve and Daryl are just taking a couple of moments rest, which is all good. And so yeah, Black looking to needing to win this game. Material wise, we have got equal material, but these pawns are completely cramping this light squared bishop out of the game. I really like this b6 move. It, after just defending that pawn, this bishop is completely stuck in, can only go to d7, and then you're going to use this b5 square as a really nice square to sort of get your pieces in, either the bishop coming out or the knight coming to b5, to put pressure on this d6 pawn, or to just keep keep this knight completely blocked in the corner. It's interesting how we've now had 2 knights go into the corner of the board, not something you see very often. Um, White decided to just keep hold of the a pawn this way, to start with, and say to black, okay, if you play rook a6 to try and attack this pawn again, I'm going to push that pawn on with a5. So white's got full control of the queen side. Whether black can get anything going on the king side, then that's going to be interesting. They do play their 4th game if the match is already won. Yes, it will be a dead rubber, but we like to complete those matches if we can. So also gives us some more chess to talk about as well. But at the moment, we've not got any matches that are already won. I'm just going to open up Steve against Daryl. We'll come back to this match in just a moment. I just want to see the conclusion of this game because Robert is short of time and looking very cramped in, and we could see our first match concluded at the end here. After this game, this knight is completely stuck in. White's knight doing a wonderful job guarding this a pawn. This rook doing a good job. This b rook is now free to come in. Probably move it to b3 to stop, black playing rook c3 and defending the knight and the bishop. John's played that move. The trade helps white for sure. If you can get a position, if you imagine a position with just, with the rook and the bishop off for, say, the rook and the knight, then this knight's going to be completely stuck, locked in the corner, and nothing black can do. White's now won the d pawn, which is a really important pawn. This d pawn's now going to come through, and it's looking very, very tricky. This trade not helping, and look at black's pieces completely stuck. No knight takes b6 trick because the knight is also defending b6, so the pawn is pinned, but there's another defender. So white can just completely leave this as it is, and can bring the king in on the king side and come through as black tries and scrambles. But this pawn and knight do a wonderful job of blocking the king out, and black has resigned. No pieces to move. This very, very strange position at the end there. Ooh, not quite Zugzwang, but just no moves to be played. That knight in the corner having no squares, and that's done the job. So John has progressed now to the final, is our first finalist in the open section. Of course, David has already qualified in the major section. They're going to play out their last game in a Smith-Morra Gambit, which Robert with the white pieces. We will hop over, I think, to Jack against Tim. A really important game here. If Tim can manage to win this game, he will level the match up at 2-2 and take it to another set of 5+2 games, which would be a fantastic result for Tim against the top seed Jack. And Tim starting out with his usual 1b3. I wouldn't say his trademark, but it's close. And it's something that Tim knows all too well, was lecturing me about it after our match on Wednesday, telling me where I went wrong, and which was exactly what I needed to hear just before streaming the mini Swiss finals. So thanks for that, Tim, when you watch this on demand. It was really helpful. That's a bit harsh. Tim and I are good friends. Don't worry about me insulting him at any points. Let's get back to the game before I dig myself any further holes. Black has gained quite an attack on this king side, but just wondering if you can get away with taking on g3 and moving the queen away, and then this e pawn's going to come under a lot of pressure. Tim needs to win this game, and I'm struggling to see how white makes progress. Rook takes e3. That's a great move. Of course, if the pawn takes the rook, queen takes g3 check, king in the corner. I don't quite see a follow-up, but bishop e5 perhaps to put pressure, to bring another attacker in. Whoops, I'm not predicting king g2. let's uh, let's open up some live analysis. This is not something I've done before, but we'll give it a go. So if pawn takes e3 here, queen takes g3 check, king into the corner. Of course, we can take on h3 with check. King over to g1. Now, where's the knockout blow here? Tricky to see immediately how you win, but I think it's fairly clear that black's doing well here. I'm going to cheat and put up the computer. Of course, you can take on e3. I was seeing if there was anything better. Queen f2, and I suppose the engine's just saying, okay, you're the exchange down, but you've won 3 pawns, and you've always got pressure against this king. So yes, just hopping back in. Jack's actually gone for a different route. Instead of taking straight away, played this intermediate move, which I didn't see. Bishop e5, out to queen g2, taking with the knight. So keeping the pressure here. But white is the exchange up. So if white can hang on, then he will be okay. But after knight takes f1, well, the engine has completely flipped. You can go queen takes g6 here. Oh, that's a chance missed there, I think. That's a chance missed, I think, from Tim. Very difficult to see. I mean, he's got, not huge amounts of time, but this move, queen takes g6, the pawn on f7 is pinned, and that would have given white some excellent play. So not taking the knight. Maybe it doesn't do quite enough, but be interesting to see if Tim sees that after the game, or whether that was just a miss. But rook takes f5. We've seen this pin, and putting pressure on f7. I tell you what, I mean, okay, black is a what's the material like here? It's level material, but fairly tricky. Fairly tricky. You can go queen e1, queen e3, and that's what's happened in the game. Chess.com's not updating my moves, I'm afraid. Let's just go into the live position here. And so black is a pawn up. With these opposite colored bishops, if white can get some sort of attack going, and I do find it difficult to see one, but if white can try, then we'll be able to... he may be able to get something. But black is seemingly the one under the attack. One on the attack, rather. Trying to think a move like, queen d2 check, king's going to hide into the corner. A pawn up, I mean, black's going to, think about moving pawn to f4 at some point. It's just a case of how does white, who needs to win this game, how does white try and get through? Black is the one under the attack, and yeah, this is looking very, very dangerous. Rook g1 was threatened, so the queen had to go into the corner there. And bishop e5, threatening rook g1 check. Ideas not quite working because the queen can take. But Tim short of time, down to 4 seconds. And Jack sacrificing the exchange, but of course is going to win it back and is trading all of the pieces off, heading into this king and pawn endgame. And that looks like all she wrote. I do have an update. A game we haven't seen any of was the match between Steve Dean and Daryl Watson. We didn't see that game, unfortunately. But Daryl did manage to take it. And so Daryl now 2-1. We were talking earlier a little bit about how Steve Dean prefers the slower time controls. So Daryl now 2-0 behind, needing to catch up, and is able to take game 3. Jack taking, though, the match 3-1 against Tim. So Jack versus John is going to be a rematch of the final in the spring. And what an opening we've had to start out this game. Steve playing his classic London, would you believe it, but d6, bishop f4, e5, takes queen h4. I can't say this. I mean, I can't believe it for 1 second, and that's not just because of the engine. it feels so wrong to bring the queen out early on. This move g3, defending the bishop, and then when it drops back, white's going to take on d6 and will be a pawn ahead. Trying to work out whether this gambit's any good. I'm not sure I fully believe it. I must admit, you can win a second pawn here. Really, you've got to be a little bit careful because when you take on d6, you can go. Oh no, you can't go queen b5. I thought that was check for some reason. Very, very tricky. Got to watch out for anything, but not sure. Just to say, in let's say the dead rubber, the final match of John Underwood against Robert Taylor, it was a draw in the end. So John Underwood has taken that match 3.5 to half. Tremendous performance from John. Commiserations to Robert, who managed to beat Paul, who was my co-commentator earlier on in the quarterfinals. So making the semi-finals, something I've not been able to do in the 2 attempts I've tried. So a good effort from Robert there and come up against a very strong opponent in John. So the final will be between Jack Rudd and John Underwood in the open section. But in the major section, we still don't know. It's going to be between David Holmes, who won his match on Wednesday night, and between Steve Dean and Daryl Watson. As you can see, Steve Dean 2-1 up at the moment, but facing an unorthodox position here and taking his time. Could that be the crucial factor in this game? He's a pawn ahead, could be 2 pawns ahead if he decides bishop takes d6 is a feasible move, which he's playing here. But will that 1 minute of time invested into that decision be costly, or will it prove to be a wise decision? That was a bit manic when there were 3 games going, especially coming from the mini Swiss when we only had 2. It'd be interesting to see if Tim joins us after that match. It'd be interesting to hear his view on that mammoth match. He missed a chance in that 4th game as well to level that up with queen takes g6 in a very complicated position on the king side. But we will see. Congratulations to John, who has joined us in the chat. Congratulations to Jack, who is in the chat. I look forward to your rematch next Friday. So we will be streaming live again next Friday at 7:30 to see the conclusion of the finals in this tournament. But for now, we are sticking with this semi-final because we've got nothing else to watch. Now, you may have noticed something I didn't mention. Something I didn't mention earlier on was looking at the chess.com ratings, which I generally don't look at too much. But if you looked at the ratings for the longer games, Steve had a much higher rating than Daryl. And of course, Daryl has been playing in the Grand Prix, so his chess.com rating would have been going up and down throughout the tournaments. Whereas in the Blitz portion, they're a lot closer together. Steve's still with the advantage, but much closer. And that does mean that actually, it does mean that actually Daryl may sort of feel like he's got a better chance in these quicker games against Steve. And now with this king on f8, 2 pawns down, it's an unorthodox way of playing in the opening for sure. It was a nice attempt to try and get out of Steve Dean's theory of the London, but I don't think it's quite worked out. I think White's going to have time to play moves like knight f3, bishop g2, and castle, get the king to safety. There's this theme that we were saying on Wednesday, me and Tim, all the way through was consolidate. Just be patient. If you're ahead on material, just make sure your position is solid, so that you can go forwards and then use the material in the end game to win the game. Oh, gonna slightly calm down after the excitement of those open blitz games. Right. So what are we seeing here? Black now developing as well, but 2 pawns down. It's tricky to know where Black's going to be getting his counterplay. Of course, with the times as short as they are, the time controls as they are, it's always going to be a little bit scary to play against. And I suppose with this move h5, Steve's probably concerned slightly about castling kingside, because then this move h4 is going to come in and potentially open up an attack on the white king. But it's a case of whether, if white just leaves his king on e1, whether black can achieve anything in the centre of the board. And if black can threaten that, force white to castle kingside, then maybe start threatening on the kingside with moves like h4. That feels like the best way of playing. This is a nice way of playing from Steve, though, just offering the trade of queens, which clearly favours Steve, 2 pawns up, and also putting extra pressure on this b pawn. Even considering taking the third pawn, going 3 pawns up, definitely a reasonable decision by Steve. And Daryl's spending time, spent a minute earlier on as well. So actually the time advantage that Daryl had is going down. And I think, that had to be one of the decisions to make in, after the opening didn't quite go so well, dropping the 2 pawns. You have to utilise the fact you're ahead on the clock to your advantage. I mean, this may have been the best move, but, excuse me, trading the pieces here practically makes it very, very difficult for Daryl to win this game. If you're trying to maybe salvage the draw, then you might think that, trading this bishop, getting the knight active, and trying things like that might give you enough activity to at least threaten something to save the game as a draw. But in a must-win situation, this is looking very, very difficult for black here, for Daryl. And that would mean that Steve Dean would go through 3 points to 1, and we would have no tie breaks. There were certainly some threats of tie breaks in the match between Jack and Tim, and in this match as well. There was definitely the potential for some tiebreakers, like we saw on Wednesday in the mini Swiss. But here it is looking, so long as Steve keeps his composure, and we saw that in abundance on Wednesday when he won the mini Swiss in the tiebreak portion, which was a similar time control to this. If he has the technique to, just draw this position even 2 pawns up, which, I think he's odds-on favourite to do it, then he'll be going through to the finals, where he will face David Holmes. And the trade of rooks there is definitely helping White's cause. White was threatening rook d8 check, and, well, still is threatening rook d8 check, but now that's checkmate, and that is going to seal the deal. Very difficult position. Black probably had to play a move like king g8, but that's going to trade the rooks in the corner, and that's not helping Black's cause in trying to win that game. He could play a move like king e8, but as it is, checkmate on the board has ended it, and Steve has taken a 3-1 win over Daryl. And that concludes the semi-finals. We didn't actually see the win from Daryl in this match. We were keeping an eye on the other 2 semi-finals. So I'm just going to bring that up so we can take a look at it. And yes, thanks everyone for joining me and Paul this evening. Obviously, Paul had to dart off, but many thanks to him for joining us on the stream. It was greatly appreciated after Tim qualified for the semi-finals through me, so had to had to play instead of commentate. I'll get my get my words out at some point, as I'm trying to just find the right the right buttons to get Daryl's win against Steve Dean on the board and on the stream. Here we go. It's only right that we take a look at this game. So there we go. Here we are. So this is the game 3 between Steve Dean and Daryl Watson, which I saw was a short game, but we didn't catch it on the stream. So we had Steve playing his usual Caracan, and playing this h5 move, so getting control of the light squares. But what happens in the game is, both players developing normally, and Black putting some pressure on the central pawns here, but White having enough to defend them. And then at some point, Black castles kingside. We'll get to it because this has been fairly standard so far, fairly standard manoeuvring rather. Black using this queen to try and take control of some of these light squares, but now after Black castles kingside, Daryl decides to go for the throat and sacrifices the pawn and tries to get this pressure on the dark squares, and rook takes f5, g takes, and then queen takes f5, and there's a lot of pressure going on here. Rook f8. I think this is pretty much over. I can't actually see a defense to this bishop moving, and queen h7 checkmate. That looks very, very tricky. Maybe a move like f6, but then queen g6 check. Ooh, a really nice rook sacrifice here. I almost don't want to look at the engine to see if it's sound. It's a really nice aggressive idea after takes and queen h7 checkmate. That was the game that took that match to 2-1. But Steve was able to win the fourth game to win that match 3-1. I'm pleased you played the birds, John. I'm sure Paul was as well when we saw that on the stream. Tim also played a Dutch defense in his match against Jack, which I haven't seen him play that often. So lots of f-pawns flying up the board. Maybe that's a sign of things we can expect in the finals a week today. I think we'll call it there, given all the matches are finished. Many thanks for everyone for joining me. A nice short stream this evening. The 3 matches didn't take particularly long to get some decisive winners. We didn't get tie breaks. Maybe we'll see some tie breaks in the finals next Friday. So that will be 7:30 again on this channel, the usual way to get hold of all the chess content. Final little plug, all the videos for this tournament, and also the previous Grand Prix that we did in the spring and the mini Swiss. Most of the videos are still on the Twitch channel, so you can go to videos on this channel and see it. There's also a YouTube channel with the same name, Chester1883, which you can go to, which will have all of our past videos. I'll upload this one as soon as I can, but it usually takes a few hours for it to upload. So many thanks to Paul for joining me on the stream, and many thanks to the people watching today or on the videos afterwards. And we will see you next Friday at 7:30 for the finals. Jack Rudd against John Underwood in the Open, David Holmes and Steve Dean in the Major. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you next Friday.